Hello, welcome to number 134. Today I am going to be talking about New Order's umpteenth album, Lost Sirens. It is Sunday, the 29th of August 2021, which means that 28 years ago today I was sat at home watching a documentary called New Order Story on British television whilst New Order played at the Reading Festival, and 23 years ago now, 23 years ago, right now, I was watching New Order at the Reading Festival. At this point, this was the DVD release of that show. They were probably coming up towards the end of True Faith or Bizarre Love Triangle. That was a fantastic gig. It's probably in my definitely my top 5 shows of all time. As said before, I'm going to be talking about the final album that was released by New Order when Peter Hook was a member, although it was released after he left the band. It's called Lost Sirens. I need to count up how many albums there are now. Looking at my shelf: Movement, Power, Corruption of Lies, Low Life, Brotherhood, that's 4, Substance, Technique, Republic, 7, Get Ready, Waiting for the Sirens Call, that's 9. So this will be the 10th album by New Order, although it was never intended to be released as an album. The reason being is that when the band were recording the album preceding that, Waiting for the Sirens Call, here's a copy on CD, and here's a copy of the Japanese edition of Waiting for the Sirens Call. The band were also recording extra material, and they recorded about 7 or 8 extra songs, which were in a state of pretty much near completion. The original plan was to go into the studio, write 3 or 4 more songs, and then they'd have another album and they'd be ready to go. Things didn't quite work out like that. So we start the story of what happened with Lost Sirens with the end of 2005, the release of the compilation album New Order Singles, hot on the heels of Waiting for the Sirens Call, presumably designed to sell more CDs to people, sell them things that they already own. This will have been the 3rd greatest hits album from New Order, after Substance in 1987 and The Best of New Order in 1994. They've left it a staggeringly lax 11 years, until Singles was released. And the band backed it up with some touring in 2006. The big change that had happened around the recording of Waiting for the Sirens Call is that Peter Hook had become sober, entered rehab, quit his various drink and drug vices, and I think we're seeing things with what alcoholics refer to as a new light of clarity. It is a thing which happens, which is, if you are somebody that drinks a lot, when you stop drinking, you are then able to have a new perspective upon events which were happening before and after, and you're able to see perhaps things in a very, very different perspective, perhaps a new light. Sometimes people were drinking to cover for anxieties, or to perhaps dampen down voices or ideas or feelings. It's a coping mechanism in some respects. Sometimes it's just because it can be really fantastic fun, and I don't say that in a flippant or light manner. It's very true, and everyone's story as to how they've got to that is different and unique. So we start 2006 with New Order in a newly kind of sober configuration, really. Again, not touring a huge amount. There'd been some simmering tensions in the band. And the best place to start talking about the simmering tensions in the band is to talk through these 3 books, which I have mined in nearly every episode so far. Bernard Sumner, Stephen Morris, and Peter Hook himself. These are literally the horses and their actual mouths, if that makes sense. Whilst each story differs in some areas and has some different bits of information that's in them, or maybe different perspectives upon certain things, there is a common and unique set of events which all 3 stories share. The first one is that Hooky missed the last week of mixing of the album, Waiting for the Sirens Call, went into rehab, and according to reports, changed his life and his behaviour, and is now sober and clean, which is good. The second one is that there was an explosive meeting on probably the 41st floor of a hotel in Tokyo in summer 2005. The one where Stephen Morris waited 15 minutes before he decided to go back up to his room because he has a fear of heights. Understandable. I don't like being on floor 41 of anything. And Bernard and Hooky had what's called in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy terms a frank exchange of views. I will take the third-hand story from Stephen Morris's book, Fast Forward. These are all, by the way, essential readings. At breakfast the next morning, sitting as close to the window as humanly possible, the meeting's instigator, Hooky, waved me over. Well, I fucking told him, he said conspiratorially. Told him what? I told him what I fucking thought of him. I told the fucking fucker what I thought of him. And how did he take it? Well, the fucking fucker. Oh dear, it had not gone well, but Hooky felt that a great victory had been gained. Over what and to what end was never said. Well, very clearly, I think, when Peter Hook was talking to, I think, Thomas Dolby after Peter had left the band, he said to Thomas that, and Thomas said, well, let me guess, money and power. And that's probably the reason why the relationship broke down. Now, as previously documented in this book, how accurate that is, the financial split in the band hadn't been equal for some time. And so it was something like 50% for Bernard, something like 25% for Hooky, 15% maybe a bit more for Stephen, and then 10% for Phil. Those figures are approximate. But the idea of it being, 4 equal legs of a table had long ceased to be, in financial terms, the reality of the situation. Now, I'm very sympathetic to both parties in this. It may not necessarily sound like I am, but I understand their points of view. I don't necessarily always agree with them. I understand Bernard's point of view in so much as that touring in the late 80s had been very difficult for his health, and he needed to remove himself from touring, and also wanted to see his kids grow up, and that there had been times when he probably felt he'd been carrying the burden of leading and running the band more than others. For example, when they were making Republic, Bernard was taking writing music and writing new parts over songs because he didn't think that the parts that the band were writing were necessarily the right ones for the song. So there's a degree of that. There is a degree of, I think, what's called LVS, lead vocalist syndrome, where they think that without them the band wouldn't necessarily exist. And obviously there's also an element of going, well, I don't want to tour too much because it's bad for my health. Although you look at New Order's touring regime, it's mostly been something like 20 shows a year for quite some time. It's not a heavy touring regime by any stretch of the imagination. And so probably Hooky felt that he was being frustrated and constrained by the other members of the group, wasn't able necessarily to work as hard as he wanted to, or to make as much money as he wanted to, and had the financial structure of the band been more equal, that might have changed how things work. So there were some burning resentments, I think, between Peter and Bernard. And Bernard just said it's not really a feud, because a feud is too directional, and I don't really kind of want to get involved too much in that. So what happened, I think, was that there was two sides of the band were pulling in two different directions. And then another, as I think as Stephen said, well, look on this side. We've just finished playing a tour. We're in Tokyo. We've made a substantial amount of money. Isn't that enough? Well, I'm not sure. I mean, certainly, Hook does mention some of the financial recompense that he got. So, for example, they did 6 gigs in South America in late 2006, and those were the ones that effectively, I think, were the last period for the band, where Hooky was paid £130,000, but the band overall were getting £600,000. And from my perspective, if you're on an average salary in the UK, and an average salary in the UK at that point was something like £22,000, maybe a little bit less. And by the way, that's the average, that's not the mean. So most people get less. If one guy gets £200,000 and everyone else gets £20,000, You know, what you could say, if you've got 19, 20 people, 19 on let's say 20 people on £20,000, and one person on 600, on one person on £200,000, what you find is the average is, let's say, 21 divided by 600, which works out at something like 30,000, whereas actually 19 people are getting 20 and someone else is getting 10 times what everybody else is getting. Maths is and numbers and figures are complicated. I should have got a graph for that, but I didn't. But for example, if you're earning, let's say, maybe 5-6 times the average annual salary of a person in the UK for 6 days work, or 6 shows, you know, that's a substantial amount of money, and it does need to be put in a context around that, really. But as we know, absolute power corrupts, and everyone's all a shower of bastards. So New Order were not particularly happy at this point. There were some very clear differences of opinion in the band over time. The band started 2006 with some touring. So I think the first show was a cancer research awareness show at the Manchester Evening News Arena in January 2006. They played an all Joy Division set for the second time and for the last time with Peter in the band. And I think Peter felt quite pleased that he was reclaiming some of those songs and playing those songs again after a long break. And the band then decided they were going to follow up the singles album, which, by the way, hadn't had a single, with a summer tour and also a series of singles. So what they did is they released 12 12-inch singles in what was called the 12 by 12 campaign. They were all released on the same day. I know they were all released on the same day because I ordered them into my local HMV and I bought all 12 in one go for something like £36 or more than that, maybe 43. They were £3.49 each, and they were, you know, vinyl only 12-inch singles of unused mixes, rare mixes, and other bits and pieces, effectively to build a bit of life back into the singles album. These singles had, for some reason, only been released on vinyl, and the impression I get is that they included the extra older songs. So when they did the Waiting for the Sirens Call single in 2005, and the B-sides had included remixes of Bizarre Love Triangle, Temptation, and Everything's Gone Green, is that they clearly had some leftover mixes of old tracks, and they also had some leftover mixes of some new ones, and they put them all out on these 12 inches. This was the first one. It was Waiting for the Sirens Call, which was the Planet Funk remix, backed with the Isle dub. Now, the Planet Funk remix is the version that the band have been playing live for a number of years. If you've seen them recently, certainly 2015, they were playing the Planet Funk mix of Waiting for the Sirens Call. Recently they've started doing a medley of Waiting for the Sirens Call remix and Vanishing Point. This is Someone Like You, which is backed with James Holden heavy dub and the Funk Devoid mix. Some of those were released on CDs and 12 inches around about the time of the Get Ready album. I must admit, at this point, I'd stopped keeping track of New Order remixes because there were an awful lot of them. There was the third 12-inch, which was the Confusion and Crystal. So Confusion is the Coma and Bones remix from 2002. This version, I think, has the 1987 vocal on instead of the 1983 vocal. And it's also back with the Lee Coombs remix of Crystal, which again is a great track. Effectively, what you're getting here, by the way, when you're buying these 12 inches, is just a 12-disc vinyl-only remix album pretending to call itself singles. Then on here you got the Confusion pump panel reconstruction mix of the rest of New Order. That mix, of course, is fucking bollocks, and but it is in the Blade movie, and apparently it's a classic. Then there's the Dave Clark remix of Everything's Gone Green. This version has vocals that are different. So the version of the Dave Clark mix on the rest of had reversed vocals. This version has the vocals forwards, not necessarily making it any better, but at least making it more recognisable. And the second track on the 12-inch is the Filter Heads remix of Waiting for the Sirens Call, again not released on CD. So the next one that you have, I've forgotten how many this is now, it feels like I'm throwing you loads of records. Here is Jetstring, the Feeler vocal remix, and the Future Shock vocal remix of Someone Like You. Someone Like You has had a lot of remixes for a track that's never been played live. Here's another one. this. Are you bored yet? I'm not. This is the Crafty 12-inch featuring the Right On remix and the Glimmers dub mix of Crafty alongside the Tom Neville dub mix of Jetstream. There were some US only mixes of Crafty. They may have, I think, for some reason I'm thinking the Right On remix might have been on one of the US CD singles, so that would have been a first UK release. Then we had Here to Stay, backed with well, the extended Glitz mix of Here to Stay, and then we had the Jack LeConte dub of Jetstream. Jack LeConte was Stuart Price, who also produced Pet Shop Boys albums, Electric, Super and Hotspot, as well as some New Order stuff during this period. And then we have one of the better selling 12 inches because it has 4 tracks on. Classic 12-inch remixes here. Bizarre Love Triangle, the Shep Pettibone extended dance remix, basically your standard 1986 12-inch version. The Kevin Saunderson remix of Round and Round, the Shep Pettibone remix of True Faith, which is absolutely fantastic, and the Steve Silk Hurley mix of Fine Time. Quite why they didn't put all of these mixes onto a third CD of the singles or released a special remixes CD, I don't quite know. This is one of the ones that sold more because it's got remixes of True Faith and Regret that haven't previously been released. Presumably at the time that they did the remixes of this single, and they put some of the old songs remixed on the B-side. They also asked King Rock to remix True Faith and Toka Disco to remix Regret. I don't remember these mixes, which is not necessarily a good thing. But as I've said, there's a lot of New Order. In fact, there's only I've been through 9 of these already. Then Blue Monday, the original 1988 version, and the Hard Floor remix from 1995. This one did chart. I think this one made the top 75 because it's Blue Monday. The others hung around for a bit longer. We also had another 4-tracker. This is the Richard X extended mix of Bizarre Love Triangle. So the way they had the edit on the B-side of Waiting for the Sirens Call. Here's the 12-inch version on a 12-inch. We've got the Arthur Baker remix of Jetstream. We've got the John Roby remix of Shell Shock, which is to say it's a standard 12-inch version. And then we've got the 12-inch extended mix of Thieves Like Us, which is odd because there was no other version of Thieves Like Us that was commercially released at the time, apart from the 12-inch mix. And then the last one is the Dub Vulture remix of Subculture, which is absolutely terrible. The State of the Nation, Shame of the Nation remix, again, absolutely terrible. And then finally Stuart Price's remix of I Told You So, which is the only unreleased track on this 12-inch. These 12 inches probably didn't do anything to promote the singles album, and they probably shouldn't have done, really. As I've said before, they should have been like a singles remix record, but they didn't put that out. Instead, they just put out 12 inches. Promotional CDs and stuff were floating around, and of course they were pushing everyone towards buying them from iTunes. Like the fool that I am, or perhaps you might want to think about it as the loyal customer, the frequent flyer, I bought them all because I figure you can never have too many New Order remixes, which is something which I've stuck to this day. The band carried on touring in 2006 and played about 20 shows. They played their biggest UK tour in 20 years, because they played Bournemouth, and I think they played Liverpool in the summer, they played Glasgow, they played London, they played Wolverhampton. I decided not to go and see them at London. I decided to go and see them at the Wolverhampton Civic Hall on the 29th of October 2006, which, as it turned out, was the last New Order show with Peter Hook in Europe. And probably not long after that was when Hook made the final decision to leave the group. If I'd have known, I would have gone to Wembley. Wembley, they started with Joy Division songs and they played a chronological set going all the way through their career. At this point, New Order didn't really change their set list around, so if you saw them on one day and then you saw them on another day, the chances was 80-85% of the set was the same, and I decided not to go to Wembley. I decided to go to Wolverhampton instead. I wish I'd gone to Wembley, but I didn't, and I'm not going to cry any tears about that. You know, I don't want to be capped in hindsight. I would rather leave that for politicians. But Wolverhampton was the last UK show that Peter Hook played as a member of New Order, and there are only 5 shows after that. Now, according to Bernard's book, Wolverhampton was a very good show. According to Peter's book, it was equally very good. I was there and I could testify and tell you that it was a very, very good show indeed. I think that I didn't know it was the last show that Hook was going to play. I mean, I thought actually that, you know, there can't be a huge amount of money being in New Order at that point. You know, if you're playing 3,000 people a night, charging 25 quid, that's £75,000 in ticket sales, assuming you sell them all. Let's say that's 6 shows. Sure, that's a fair chunk of money, but on the other hand, also, it's not the kind of, you know, arena conquering size and level that perhaps you might want to be when you're 25 years into being a band. It's still better than a day job. Of course, it's still better than a day job. I remember saying to my brother, famous last words, they can't be doing it for the money because the money can't be that great. Obviously, I was completely wrong. Hook had said at this point that he was doing that just for the money. He wasn't interested in playing the shows after a certain point, and he wanted the money, which is understandable. I mean, I don't go to work for free. Who does? But there we are. I thought Wolverhampton was a great show. Really loved it. The crowd was very, very excited. It reminded me. I mean, seeing New Order in 2006. It was, you know, there's a lad contingent to the audience, but in a nice way. It's like sensitive disco lads, whereas now it's sensitive disco dads. But at the time, I was in my early 30s, and seeing New Order was the kind of thing that, you know, it reminded me a lot of seeing Oasis. Actually, they're kind of like this euphoric kind of sense of, I'm seeing a band that I love and everybody loves them. And if you like New Order, you don't just like New Order. Most people don't who like New Order don't like New Order. They love New Order. New Order are like one of the favourite bands. And it's not like, I don't know, I think Van Morrison. I'm sure there are some people that absolutely love Van Morrison, but most people that go to see Van Morrison just like him. They don't love him necessarily. Whereas people that went to see New Order then, they loved New Order. That was the thing. It was like there's a different level of passion and engagement when I saw New Order than when I saw some other bands. And that is you know, some bands I watch and I go, there was like few people really love the band, but most people kind of just like the band. New Order, it was always like, if you went to a New Order gig, over half of the people were like really into it, and if they played a Joy Division song, some people would definitely be crying. You know, it's a different level of passion than you get from some shows. And it was a great show, actually. Of course, I do wish I'd seen them in Glasgow, and the reason I wish I'd seen them in Glasgow was because that was where the DVD Live in Glasgow was recorded and filmed. This version was released. It was released in 2008 as a 3 or 2 disc set, depending upon which retailer you went to. Features a show filmed over, or filmed it features 2 nights recorded in Glasgow, not at the Barrowlands for some reason. But it also features rare and unseen footage on the second disc, which is effectively drawn from what Stephen describes as Stephen's pile of shit. So old VHS tapes that Steve had hoarded and used, that he had slowly been converting through into an electronic form. And so over time, you know, he'd taken all of those shows and he picked out some favourite bits and put them on the second disc. Now, if you were especially canny and you bought this from HMV, there was an exclusive limited edition from HMV that came out that featured, hang on, I'll move that gig flyer there, which featured the second official New Order live CD. New Order live at Glasgow on CD, effectively a port of most of the songs from the set onto a CD, although not all of them. So if you bought it from HMV, you got Live at Glasgow, rare and unseen footage, Live at Glasgow CD, and I also got New Order at Heaven, From Heaven to Heaven live, effectively something that I was given when I was leaving a Bad Lieutenant gig, I think in 2009. And New Order live at Glasgow or live in Glasgow, was the last live release with Peter Holcomb. It's a good show. It's not an amazing show, but it's a good show. Um, and it features an encore of Transmission, Shadow Play, and Love Will Tear Us Apart. At this point, the band have started to play on a very regular basis a larger number of Joy Division songs. And I don't want to sound churlish about that, but I wish they didn't play so many Joy Division songs, because to me, New Order and Joy Division are two separate entities. And I would rather have, for example, if I get to see New Order play Shadow Play, which is fantastic, seeing three quarters of Joy Division playing a Joy Division song. But on the other hand, what that means is I'm not getting a song like Round and Round or Vanishing Point, or let's say Fine Time, Here to Stay. Not any of those songs. And those songs have more meaning to me because I'm younger. To me, Joy Division is a museum piece as opposed to a live living band. And so I've not necessarily always felt fully comfortable watching a set made exclusively of Joy Division material or lots of Joy Division songs played by New Order. The New Order songs have more meaning to me. I grew up with the New Order songs. Live in Glasgow is a good release. It's not incredible, but it's a good and accurate representation of the band as they were in 2006, warts and all. Now, 2007 came the release of the Anton Corbijn film, which was his version of Ian Curtis's life story. It was a film called Control that was filmed in Nottingham in 2007, and the soundtrack to Control had 3 instrumental tracks by New Order, and those were called Exit, Hypnosis, and Get Out. Now, those were really great, interesting instrumental tracks, but it was the last time that the classic, if you want to call it classic era of New Order with Peter Hook on bass recorded, and they recorded a number of instrumental kind of songs to work as mood pieces inside Control. But it was during the recording of Control and the release of Control that everything started to fall apart. Peter Hook has put more information into it than anybody else. At this point, the South American tour has happened. The last 5 shows, largely outdoors with Peter on bass. And Peter says, I returned home with mixed feelings. I felt guilty taking £130,000 for 5 gigs that I'd hated playing. I had a decent second career as a DJ. We were doing exciting things with the Hacienda name, and I was in the throes of forming a new band with Manny and Andy Rourke, which didn't work out. He said, the main thing, though, was I felt released from the tyranny of the band. I had a meeting with Rebecca, who was one of the band's managers, soon after we got back, and told her the group was finished, it was over. She implored me to think it over, take some time to cool off, and so on. I was asked to keep my trap shut and pretend everything was hunky-dory for the good of the group, and see how you feel in a year. Now, the band had an offer to play the Manchester International Festival in February 2007, which was £125,000 plus production, and I think Bernard was keen to do that. And then Peter said, well, what happened to the year off you wanted? Tell Barney I don't want to work with him anymore. I told you when we got back from South America, the band is over. And she said, can't you tell him? And I said, no, that's what I pay you to do. And in May 2007, in the run-up to the release of Control, Clint Boone interviewed Peter on Manchester radio. And Clint asked if we'd split, and I replied that I wasn't working with Barney anymore, which became New Order had split up, which in turn created all sorts of problems. Communication is a classic thing that goes wrong. Is that sometimes people feel that they're communicating their wishes, and other people, and when they're being expressed, they don't necessarily land in the way in which they're meant to be. And not long after that, the band went to Cannes. Bernard, Stephen, Gillian, Peter, and had the premiere of Control, the Anton Corbijn film. And you can kind of see the pictures. And in fact, in the pictures from that period, I'm just trying to see if I can find one actually. What you'll find is that there isn't a, like, you know, Bernard and Peter never stand next to each other. Stephen's always in the middle, and it's a strange thing looking at the body language around that. And I'm sure that if you were, let's say, you know, a psychologist or someone, you could come up with a much better kind of description of what was happening in the band. I mean, for me, I was hearing things on the rumour circuit. I was a member of the ceremony mailing list. I was also part of the New Order online forums, and I was listening to what people were saying in there about how Hooky wasn't working with Bernard anymore. And as far as I was concerned, I just kind of thought, yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. Sorry, I can't find the picture here of from the Cannes photo session, but Bernard is always at the opposite end of the picture to Peter in all of them. At the same time, when Stephen and Bernard were in London, I think, for an award ceremony, a Lifetime Achievement Award, Gillian had been diagnosed with cancer. And she rang Stephen and told him that whilst he was meant to be picking up a award for his lifetime achievement as on behalf of New Order. Completely understandable, while Gillian wasn't in the band. And thus Peter Hook left the group, a combination of money and power. I presume that, on the basis of what I've heard, is that Peter probably wanted a more equitable or equal financial settlement, in his opinion. He probably wanted to play more shows, probably wanted to change up the set list a bit, put some older songs in, shake up things a little bit more, work a little bit more, make a little bit more money. I completely understand both sides of the equation, but if you've been paying any attention to what's been in the press, then you'll know that Peter wears his heart on his sleeve, and he's been very vocal about how some members of New Order are not nice human beings, which undoubtedly has not done him necessarily any favours in the press. But you know, when someone's hurt, it's completely understandable. I've been very, very hurt by people, and when I was much younger, I was more vocal about that online than I have been. That still didn't solve the problem. There was no New Order. Control was the last thing that the band did together. There was the unfinished songs from the Sirens Call sessions, which were sitting in some form of limbo. And this leads us to the last New Order album with Peter Hook as a member, released in 2013. It is called Lost Sirens. The cover art, by the way, is a highly kind of mosaic version of the cover art for Waiting for the Sirens Call, effectively reduced down to 9 main colour parts, which also kind of ties in with the fact that there are 8 songs on the album, and each song has an associated colour on the inner sleeve. So if you kind of look at it there, you've got I'll Stay With You, which is the kind of yellow, which is in the top, Sugarcane, which is the pink, you've got Recoil, which is the dark green, you've got Californian Grass, which is the green here, and then you flip over to the other side of the sleeve, each song has a colour again. So you've got Hellbent, which is the dark blue, there it is, Shake It Up, which is that, I've Got a Feeling, which is this, and then Told You So, which is that. So each one of those ties into a colour of the song. So it kind of goes back to Peter Saville's colour chart on the beginning of Power, Corruption and Lies. Now this is only an 8-song album, so in some respects some people think of it as an EP, and also one of the songs is a version of I Told You So, from Waiting for the Sirens Call, present in the Stuart Price remix version, which was on the previous 12-inch in the 12x12 series. So you've got 7 New Order songs, and you've got 1 new mix of an old New Order song. Now I think this album suffers in so much as presumably the agreement to get it released was that there was going to be no extra mixing, no extra dubbing, nothing. It was going to be just the mixes that the band had left them in at the state when then completed the recording of Waiting for the Sirens Call in early 2005, which is 7 finished tracks, an alternate mix. There were no singles from this album, there were no remixes from this album. Only 2 songs from this album have been played live by New Order, That's I'll Stay With You, which was played 5 times, and Californian Grass, which was played 6 times. And none of those have been played after 2013. So I've seen none of the songs from this album played live, which is pretty strange. Also, it is 8 songs, it's about 40 minutes long, so it is a New Order album. It's maybe not the album that was originally intended when it was being recorded, but it's the closest thing to a New Order album that there's going to be. And if you like all the other New Order stuff, don't overlook this. This is very much worth listening to. What I will say is that if you take that plus the 3 songs off the Control soundtrack, you have 11 New Order songs, which 10 haven't been on any previous New Order album, and they are well worth listening to. They are not bad songs. Some of them are not amazing songs, but they're not bad songs. I'll Stay With You is a classic New Order track, which really should have been played live a lot more than it actually was. The other songs, Sugarcane is okay, Recoil is okay, California, they're okay songs. Hellbent was a single in 2011 for a Greatest Hits album, which I'll get to next time around. Shake It Up is pretty good. I've Got a Feeling is pretty good as well. There's not a bad song on there. Certainly, some of the songs that are on here are better than some of the songs that are on Waiting for the Sirens Call. And if you've taken the best songs out of this and the best songs out of Waiting for a Sirens Call, you'd have a heck of a lot better album than you actually did for Waiting for the Sirens Call. Flip side of that is Lost Sirens would be pretty bad, I'm afraid to say. But then, not every song that you write can be brilliant. Not every track can be a banger. Although, as Bono said when he was talking about U2, he said, U2 are the greatest editors of U2 songs that there are, and there are far more U2 songs that have been written than have ever been recorded, which is one way of putting it. Frank Turner said a very similar thing. It's actually the biggest editing that you have as an artist is between the brain and the body, the transcription of the song, the performance of the song, the writing of the song. Sometimes the idea is you don't think is necessarily good enough to keep. Hence why it's always a risk having a guide vocal or something like that. The Levelers, for example, had some remixes of, I think, World Freak Show, and they used the guide vocal by mistake on that, and they were less than pleased when their former record label had done so. I think Lost Sirens is a really good album. It works very well, but it would be better with those 3 songs from Control in, and it would have been better if the band had gone and finished the songs, but it wasn't going to happen. The band went in 2 very, very different, very definite directions, and when you look at what happened since, is that the remaining members of New Order have mostly played together since then. So Stephen, Bernard, Phil have all played together since 2008. There wasn't a split there, and the crew, apart from Peter Hook's guys, have all stayed with New Order as well. I'm not going to take sides around that. I'm sympathetic to both of them. I completely understand the desire to play lots, release lots, tour lots, shake up the set list lots. I also completely understand the desire to not quite work quite so hard and to relax and take a little bit more time in the world. But what that means is that you've got 2 very, very different mindsets which are incompatible at the end of the day. And you get to a certain age and you kind of think, well, if I don't have to do this, why would I do this? Certainly as I've got older, I've been able to carve out a life which I like, with people that I like. I've worked hard to get to that point. I'd like to keep it at that point. And I don't have to put up with things necessarily that I don't want to. And life as you get older is all about kind of reducing your life to the things that you find the most, because life's too short to be unhappy. And if you're unhappy, you should be working towards making yourself happy. And I guess for both parties in that, they've got to the point where they thought, well, if I don't have to do this, and I don't need to do it because of money, why would I do it? And so they've both become, presumably, relatively financially self-sufficient and stable, and able to operate independently of each other. They've got a shared legacy, a shared history, but then there's a point where you kind of look at it and go, would I want to spend time with people if I don't necessarily want to be around them just for money? And then you look at the amount of money that we're talking about and go, well, if you're on an average salary, for example, and you need that job in order to keep food on the table, completely understandable why you'd put up with it for a while. And obviously, the more money there is, the more tempting it is to put up with something because it pays well. But then on the other hand, you go, well, actually, there's some things in life that are more important than money. There are people that I would never work with again because I know who those people are, and I think those people are dangerous. There are people that probably don't like working with me and wouldn't work with me again. I'm totally fine with that. They're almost definitely the same people. And if you don't need to do it and you don't have to do it, why would you do it? Which is a nice way of saying I wish them both well. I'm sympathetic to both sides of it, despite what it might sound like. I understand both people's points of view, or both sides in this particular kind of discussion, and I wish them all well. When I talk about the respective solo careers after the New Order was put on pause, I may become a bit less ambiguous in some of the business decisions or some of the artistic decisions that have been made, but I still want them both to be successful and happy in everything that they do, even if on occasion I do think, yeah, you've been a bit of a prat. So, Lost Sirens is a really good New Order album. It's probably the worst New Order album that's been released, but considering how good New Order albums are, and considering it was never meant to be a New Order album, the fact that it's as good as it is pretty impressive. And I would suggest if you sit down and go, God, New Order haven't done anything for a while, I want to listen to some New Order music. If you haven't heard Lost Sirens, don't overlook it. Go and give it a listen. If it's not for you, completely understand that. But if it is, then you found another album that you love, and you should do it. So that's Lost Sirens for you. Now, as I've mentioned before, I think Lost Sirens didn't have any singles. It didn't have any remixes. It didn't have any B-sides because there simply just wasn't enough left to release. We've got the 4 tracks on side A, we've got the 4 tracks on side B. I listened to the vinyl of this. It's a really nice pressing, and the vinyl comes with a CD in a card sleeve, which is just here. Which is probably cheaper than maintaining a download code for a number of years. I think a CD costs something like £1. So there you have it, and that's the last New Order album which Peter Hook played on. Although it wasn't obviously a New Order album when it was being recorded, the intention was always to go in and write some extra songs, finish it off, and carry on the good work. And the extra songs will have to be from Control. I will post my preferred track listing, including the Control songs slotted into the sequence, in the comments below. And that takes us up to the end of 2007, the release of Control, the Control soundtrack, and then the 2013, after the event release of the Lost Sirens album, which is overlooked, I think, in the band's body of work. New Order hadn't split. New Order never said that they'd split around that. What they said is that Peter had left the group. And there was the original idea, or the original discussion, which was if one member of the group leaves, the group is over. But as we'd found with Joy Division, when Ian had left the group, albeit through dying, and when Gillian had left the group through health, is that that original idea had obviously been compromised a little or modified over time. I think it's fair to say that it's completely understandable why Gillian wasn't in the group, because of the health issues that she had in her family, and then obviously with cancer as well. Is that if you're going to expect somebody to play in the band when either they or their family are really, really poorly, it's pretty damn selfish. But Gillian has had the all clear. The band have reformed. Well, reformed is perhaps not the word because they never officially split. They've continued with a new bass player, with Gillian on keyboards, and they play live. Well, not quite to this day, but in a couple of weeks they're going to play their first show since before the COVID pandemic. I'm going to wrap up here. Hopefully that's been a not inaccurate version of what's happened around New Order. Tempers and emotions have been pretty high amongst various people in the group. It's been pretty expensive. There's been lawsuits and things going on about it. If you are a fan of Peter Hook, he is auctioning a lot of his New Order memorabilia at the moment, and you can, with a starting bid of £1 million, get all the paperwork relating to the court case, if that's what you really, really want. I would have other things to do with that £1 million, but so be it. Anyway, that's it for Sunday. I've enjoyed talking about it. I have no idea why I remember so much minutiae around the groups that I love, but I do. And I guess that is just part of who I am and how I live, is that I just remember all the useless tut, and I never remember any of the unimportant stuff. Well, I never remember any of the important stuff. I remember all the useless stuff, like New Order records, like who's got what, who played when, how many times they played a song, when they their last play a song, all that kind of stuff. I remember all of that stuff. Ask me to remember something important. Of course, I don't stand a chance. Absolutely not. But for some reason, I absorb this stuff like a sponge. I remember it. And if I talk about it to my phone, that means I don't have to bend your ear in a pub talking about New Order while you go, that's interesting, Mark. Oh, God, can't you talk about something else? Well, I don't know. Anyway, I will catch up with you all later. Take care of yourselves. Stay beautiful. And I will post some links in the comments to various live shows, remixes, and things like that, which I've mentioned throughout the course of this. I will see you all again, hopefully sometime soon, maybe even in person if you're especially unlucky. But stay beautiful, and bye.